Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the end of the week. Welcome to this conversation between Tamryn Bathceller-Adams and myself, Zanele and Njapha, conversation with Tomorrow Today. While we get ourselves ready and get a few more people coming into the room, please feel free to head over to the chat box. That'll be on your right-hand side. Let us know if you're joining this conversation either in the capacity of a teacher, or you're a parent, or even as a learner, or someone who has a vested interest in education. Let us know who you are and even where you're from. So we'd be interested to hear all of those details as we let a few more people stream into the room. We'll give it just about a minute and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us. Lovely. I see it says we've got a lot of mummies. Someone said I'm a mommy. That's lovely. We've got teachers in the room. Absolutely wonderful to see all of you. Welcome, Cape Town. So we've got people from Knysna. Thank you very much for streaming in so nicely. And I'm excited to have this conversation today. Tamryn, you were the one who said to me, there's so much anxiety going on amongst teachers, parents, and just the entire education population is now reopening schools, and they just want to know, where do we go from here? Just that feeling of anxiety is palpable. So I think let's get started with our conversation. Our conversation today is meant to be a short one. Let's see how it goes. We're meant to just have 30 minutes to let you know just some tips on how you can manage and adjust during this time. But feel free to pop your questions and any kind of comments you may have during this time in the chat box, and we'll engage with those as we go on and then towards the end of the session. All right, so my co-host for today's webinar is a young lady who goes by the name of Tamryn Bathceller-Adams, and Tamryn is a psychologist and a consultant. In her private practice, Tamryn does extensive work with parents, teachers, and families as well. And then Tomorrow Today, she helps organizations and executive teams to actually become more conscious and emotionally intelligent, which I think is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Tamryn. Over to you.
Well, Zanele, I think you're very kind. For those of you who have just joined our conversation, well, before we went live, Zanele and I were discussing what constitutes young and what constitutes old. So she's very generous in her description there, because I made an avid argument that I'm still young. So thanks, Zanele. This is a really important topic. And when it came to thinking about it, we're a good pair here, because you've got a background and an expertise in education. You've been a foundation teacher, an intermediate phase teacher. And so I think you've really got a good gauge on what teachers are feeling during this really unprecedented time. And aside from that, for those of you who don't know, Zanele is also an unlearning expert, which again becomes incredibly relevant during this pandemic. How do you unlearn the kind of orthodoxies and the routines that you've had that are no longer working, and how do you relearn what it is that you're going to need to equip and skill you going forward? So in times that require so much adjustment and so much transition, having that kind of expertise in this conversation is really invaluable. And as Zanele mentioned, this conversation started because I was very aware of how many of the conversations I've had in my private practice have been kind of pivoted or reorientated towards this anxiety of going back to school, especially for our South African population, for whom June 1st, which is Monday, is looming. And that has brought up a lot of uncertainty. So Zanele, maybe we should kick off with you, because fresh out of a workshop just this morning with a group of teachers, and getting a sense from the work that you've been doing over these last few weeks, what do you feel are the kind of major themes or the big contributions that teachers are worried about at the moment? What has your sense been around that?
Sure. So I'm going to give about 3 of them, and these are 3 of the biggest ones. And I understand that there's so many others that we could potentially cover here, but I just want to speak to these 3 particularly. And the first one is the curriculum. as someone who's worked as a teacher for a few years, I know that the curriculum is just one of those, I don't want to say chokeholds, but it's just one of those things that you have to work within, and you can find limit you a lot of the time. And at this moment, the curriculum is one of the biggest questions that teachers are asking. And it's, how do we work with the curriculum? Do we shorten everything? Is the department going to advise accordingly? And what do we do with the content that we still haven't covered, especially if we still have to assess? So that's one of the biggest anxieties that teachers are looking into. And I'll give some advice on these a little later, but I just want to just count what they are. And if you're a teacher at the moment, please go over to the chat box and let me know if this is an anxiety that you do have and it resonates with you. And then the second one is the one that is probably the most obvious, is the health of the teachers themselves, and then also the health of the children. Are the children able to look after themselves in a sense where they are safe at school? And school is a safe environment where parents can put their trust and their confidence in the system, and then even the measures that the teachers have put into place. And then the last one is getting it wrong. This one is palpable. So many of the teachers at this moment are just nervous about getting things wrong. What if it doesn't work? What if children start to get infected at school and we've got more than 50 children with COVID-19 and a teacher catches it, and this and that and the other are things that are coming up. It's that fear of what happens if things don't go right? What if we get it wrong and the whole thing just falls apart? So I think those would be the three major things. And let me know if you want me to just speak to what I advise as solutions to each of these, or you'd like me to do that a little bit later. Yeah, but that's what I'm picking up, Tamryn.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you in sense of that being so palpable. And I guess part of the contribution towards that anxiety has been the lack of clarity in the global community around what are the health risks with children. And, we are not medical experts, so we're not going to necessarily be commenting on that. But I imagine that the sense of conflicting opinions and articles and expert opinions even has resulted in quite a widespread uncertainty as well.
Precisely. Yeah, you've got it straight on there. And this is the thing, we need to watch and see. And this is not something that's happened before. So no one can say, I've got COVID-19 experience in the schooling system, here's what to do. So it's new for everyone. And before I go into detail here, I'd like to hear from you, Tamryn, as someone that works extensively with parents, children, and I mean, on a continuous basis. What would you say you're picking up, especially on the front of our parents? How are they feeling? What are they starting to get anxious about?
Well, I think that it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the course of understanding this pandemic. And some of the anxieties are almost exactly the same as what you've just mentioned with the teachers. So I think one of the big things is just the unknown of this. This is a completely abnormal situation, which has resulted in really high levels of fear. And there's been a lot that's been written about that, but it's also resulted in really high levels of stress. And I think when parents or adults or society is under stress, we start mistrusting other people, and we almost come out in these kind of judgmental, or what I would call microaggressive types of ways. And I think, we're seeing a lot of this played out on social media. So suddenly it becomes, well, are you sending your child back to school? Oh my goodness, what a terrible parent you are. Or are you not sending your child back to school? What? You're depriving them of their education. And there's so much of this uncertainty and stress that it starts to kind of split people and society into sectors, either for or against, and it becomes quite territorial over that opinion, which again just adds to the anxiety and the stress. So I think I'm seeing a lot of that play itself out with parents in particular and with adults. The other conflict is around, should you send your child back or not? And for a lot of parents, especially those who are working parents, the balance, as we've unpacked in other webinars, of trying to accommodate your own personal work in combination with your child's learning has just been exhausting. And we're seeing a lot of burnouts. Parents who have struggled with depression or anxiety are struggling even more. The family system as a whole has been put under a huge amount of pressure. So there's this conflict internally with parents of, I want to maybe send my child back because actually I'm not coping and the whole family is not coping. But at the same time, I'm worried about their safety, like you've mentioned. And so I'm not too sure if I should send them back. And then the third is exactly what you highlighted with teachers, this idea of getting it wrong. And this pressure that parents are are feeling to make the right decision and not mess up and not make a mistake that's going to detrimentally impact their child. And I think that's a parent concern that's, right from conception, parents are worried about getting things wrong. And this has just aggravated that quite extensively. So those are the kind of patterns I'm seeing with parents. I think with children, it's slightly different, Zanele. And children, especially the grade 7s and the matrics, they're approaching this as kind of the older grades of each of their secondary school and high school. And with children, I don't feel that the anxiety is as high. And I think that's because children at those ages are incredibly social. And so for them, it's quite exciting, this idea of going back to school and seeing their friends. So it's not necessarily around the anxiety, but there is a lot of apprehension around the adjustments. Am I going to have the same teacher, or is the class going to be split? Am I going to be with my friends? Is it just, how are things going to be different? How is the playground going to be different? And then I think the other big emotion that I'm seeing in kids, again, especially in grade 7s and grade 12s, is that sense of loss and sadness, which is completely appropriate. I mean, these are the two grades where all the rituals and the traditions of leaving something, closing off something, and then going into something new are there, dances and graduation kind of ceremonies and all of those types of traditions, and they are going to lose out on that. And I think that we as adults need to understand that they're not just things, they're really important rituals, and they mean something, and they are really important for kids at that age in particular, and we should acknowledge their loss. And so maybe that's something teachers, can hold in mind as well. These are big things for kids of those age.
Yeah. That they are indeed. And you spoke a little bit earlier about the resilience of children, but as much as the resilience of children is a good thing, children actually pick up, whether it's teachers or parents. If you're exuding an emotion of, oh my goodness, I don't know if this is going to work out, let's all panic, it will eventually start to rub off on the children.
Absolutely. So that's called the mood ripple effect. And what it means is that the person with the most influence is normally the person who sets the tone or the mood. And so in a corporate setting, it's normally the boss, or sometimes the most influential person who's not the boss. In a classroom setting, it's the teacher. In a family setting, it's the parent. And so if the parent hasn't thought about how they are managing their own anxiety, it's definitely going to rub off on the kids. And you're going to end up with this kind of bubbling over type of mentality. And I think we see that in social media. The more people kind of collectivize over a certain idea, or the more people kind of panic, it sets off a domino effect, and then you get collective angst, which is quite paralyzing and quite scary.
It is. I absolutely agree. I see in the chat box, Angelique is asking, how are we going to get through this? What can we do? And I think it's good a time as any now to actually jump into some of the tips. And what Tamryn and I are going to do is that we're going to link these tips to the anxieties or the frustrations that we've actually named. So with the 3 tips, we're going to pair these so that it just makes it that much easier about how you can speak to each one. And I'm just going to go right ahead. I think with the curriculum and what's going on with that, I would say that it's more important now than ever to focus on the love of teaching, focus on the love of learning, and having the ability to instill that in the children more than anything else, more than trying to shoot through the curriculum in record time, or whatever the case may be. Let's advisedly try to focus on instilling a love for learning. Because whether we want to admit it or not, some of these children may not actually even come back to a classroom in the next 2 to 3 years. Because remember, unless they've got the confidence in the school and the systems that you've put into place, why should they? And so with that understanding that things have changed and will no longer be the same, let's rather focus on making sure that there's that desire to learn and that eagerness, because some children are actually finding that this digital learning is working quite well for them, and that's perfectly all right. So as teachers, let's not have that anxiety. And I know this comes up quite a lot. It's that anxiety of, where does that leave me? Do I fall away from the system? But remember that teaching will always be necessary. It's just a matter of understanding that as teachers, the face of teaching may in itself change. But when we instill that love of learning, we're able to remain relevant and keep up with whatever that looks like. And then the second thing is the health and the health of the teachers themselves, and then the health of the children. With this one, I would say that the best thing to do is to stick to the measures that have been advised, whether it's the World Health Organization or it's the measures that the school has put into place that have been advised by the government, whether it's sanitization, making sure all children's temperatures are checked in the morning, and all of those procedures have been advised because they are the best procedures and the ones that actually worked and are actually practiced in schools all over the world that are fighting COVID-19. So trust those particular systems that have been put into place and do what you need to do. I know this morning a teacher spoke to me and said, oh, the little ones are going to keep taking the masks off and they can't socially distance and all of these things. But can we afford as teachers not to put those measures into place? Knowing what we know about the little ones, and I know you may agree with this, Tam, knowing what we know about the little ones, it is important that still we put those measures in because we can't afford not to. Because if something happens, at least we've got that to fall back on, that the well-being of our learners and ourselves really is the top priority. And then the last one is getting it wrong. This is the biggest fear that most of us have. And what I want to say to this is that you need to start to be kinder to yourself. I said this morning with the teachers I was speaking to that teachers work so hard and you are an expert in your field. Understand this and know it. And then also understand the fact that no one's been here before. We're all here for the very first time. So you need to be kind to yourself. Experiment and innovate and understand where your parameters are, but be kind to yourself and understand that it's okay to make mistakes at this time because we're all trying. People have been saying the government is lying to us. Yesterday they said this and then tomorrow they said this. But the reason why they can do that is because things change so rapidly. And what served us and brought us to this point may not take us even further. So my best advice definitely on this one is just be kinder to yourselves. Don't be so critical about it, but try what you have to and do what you must. And then I'd like to hear some of your tips, Tamryn, towards our parents and even to some of the learners that may be watching today.
Well, I think, Zanele, I mean, the idea of being kind to yourself, it feels so simple. I mean, it's what we tell kind of great R's, learn to be kind. And yet somehow through adolescence maybe or into adulthood, we lose that capacity with ourselves. And we all have an internal script that we're telling to ourselves all the time. And I've noticed how punitive or how strict some people's internal script is. And it's almost as though we kind of bully ourselves. We expect ourselves to be performing better or have done that differently. Or why did you say that? Or why haven't you read that article that parent group said that you should read? And that kind of internal conversation or internal dialogue can actually be quite damaging for you as an individual. So I agree 100%, be aware of what it is that you're telling yourself and think about whether this is a healthy internal dialogue to have. I think it would be great for us to kind of flip into that slide that shows that this is a transition. And then it would be great to have your thoughts here as well, because transitions is the work that you do. But in a webinar that we held previously, we showed up the slide to show that when people are going through change, there's a psychological process, there's an emotional process that you're going to be going through as well. And in many aspects, it's the lack of control that elevates our anxiety. Sometimes just knowing this graph, just knowing this trajectory will help kind of alleviate and bring down some of that anxiety. So when the COVID-19 situation started, we were all in that beginning stage where there was a lot of panic, there was a lot of shock, there was a lot of confusion for everyone, adults, teachers, children, etc. Then we kind of went into this reorientation stage where online learning started to pick up. Some students, like you've highlighted, actually managed really well. Parents started to kind of go, okay, I can help you here and I can't help you there. But there was almost an equilibrium that was starting to develop in some families, not all families. I mean, we know that I think it's about 9.2 million students in South Africa are not accessing education because they don't have the technology, and that's a huge concern. But in families where online learning was happening, there was a reorientation process. Now we're moving out into something new again. And so in many ways, we're kind of going back to that first slide where the anxiety is there, the confusion is there, and a lot of the apprehension is there. And I think we just need to trust that we will be able to navigate this pathway and this transition once more. Everything that feels like a huge adjustment next week will slowly start to feel a little bit more settled as we become more familiar with it. And then it's going to start in a slightly new beginning. And we don't quite know what's going to happen next, but it might just be helpful to kind of think about yourselves in these three different parameters. But Zanele, I've distracted myself here because you asked me what I think would be helpful for parents and for children to consider. So I think the first thing parents need to do is to take the pressure off themselves to send their kids back. There is a huge amount of pressure in kind of making this decision, and I think it is very dependent on you, on your child, on your current family health status. Some families have people with immune compromised systems living with them. Other parents are just very apprehensive to send their child back, and there's no pressure. I think if your child is very anxious, then reconsider, maybe wait a little while, watch and see what other parents do, let next week happen, and just almost watch, wait, and wonder. Kind of stand back and just let next week unfold. And then depending on how you feel, once you've had some more affirmation or confirmation from other parents in the school, you might feel a little bit more comfortable to send your child. But take that pressure off yourself. The second thing I think we need to think about is stepping back from certain types of social media, especially the types of social media where you might be involved in parenting groups online or on WhatsApp chats, where all of that anxiety is just bubbling and bubbling. That is not going to serve you well over the course of this weekend. I am not a fortune teller, as many people predict psychologists are, but I can tell you that anxiety levels are going to rise this weekend on those groups. And so if they're fueling your anxiety, rather mute them and step out of them. Kind of don't spend too much time watching the news over the course of this weekend, and just try and calm yourself down as the parent. That kind of leads into the third thing I think is important to remember. Remember that you set the mood in your home. That mood ripple effect is a real thing. If you are coming to the conversation or the situation very panicky with your child, they're going to pick up all of that energy from you. And this happens with children right from very, very little, kind of 2-3 years old. Children pick up the mood from the people that they are around. So think about what is making you anxious. Think about how you handle anxiety, and then think about how you can kind of contain that to the best extent possible when you are interacting with your child. I think it's really important for parents to remember that teachers love your kids. And Zanele, you can probably preach this because you've been in this position. But teachers are also anxious. Teachers only want the best for themselves and for your children, and teachers are going to be doing every effort they can to make this a safe environment. And it's very hard for parents to hand over their kids. If you've got older kids, you'll remember what it felt like when you had to drop them off in grade R or grade 1. In some ways, this is similar. There's a bit of a separation anxiety that's starting to happen because everything is so uncertain. I want to implore you to trust your teachers. They really are working as hard as they can to make this a smooth transition for your child. And then I think the other elements are kind of practical tips. But Zanele, let me give you a chance to jump in if there's anything that you want to contribute before I go into kind of very practical aspects for children.
Sure, Tim. And I just want to speak to that parents do love your children. And they do. They do. It may not seem like it at times, but definitely. And one of the biggest priorities that teachers are making at this time, or putting ahead, is the health of your children, is the well-being of the children. And this is everyone's priority that's involved in this situation at the time. So whether it feels like it or not, this is it. And that's why I want to advise this cooperation, especially between the teachers and the parents and the children themselves and the learners themselves. Because unless each and every party does contribute towards making this a success, it unfortunately won't be. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. So whether a child chooses to participate in the learning process within the classroom or not is another thing altogether at this time. That child still deserves to have their educational needs met in whatever way that the school has put into practice. So I think that that's the first thing that I want to say. And then the other thing, if we want to get a little bit more practical and into the tips, I would like to also reiterate what you said, that we calm down and we relax and understand that this is a process. To follow whatever tips it is that the school is giving or whatever rules it is that we've put into place to start to play this out, participating in meetings and having the conversations. So whether it's in our teacher groups or whether it's in groups with families or parents that we work with, have the conversations, understand the feelings that are coming up with the children. How are they feeling? What are they expecting? And what are they nervous about? Because once we understand this, and this is one of the first things about unlearning, which really speaks to transitions. There's so many transitions we go through in life, and this is a transition, because what we found is that we had a normal, so to speak, way of doing school, and now it's changed. And now we have to go back all over again, and that's a transition that we have to make. Because like you said, Tamryn, we'd sort of gotten comfortable with the way that things were. And one of the best ways to unlearn or to transition is to unlearn. And unlearning really is letting go of something and then gripping hold of a completely different thing. And that will take patience. It takes awareness, which is the very first step. So understand, take personal inventory of what it is that you're feeling at this time, what your anxieties are, and what it is that you wish was the case, or whatever it is that you are dealing with at the time. And one of the best ways to actually respond to a situation is when you best understand what it is that you're facing at that moment.
So, I think there's one thing I want to kind of latch onto the end of that, and this is speaking primarily to teachers, I suspect, is that teachers have been experts at creating safe environments for children for decades, centuries even. That's what good teachers do. And I see this all the time when I'm working, especially with younger children having to be handed over to new environments and new teachers. And teachers, you don't create safety by the rules that you have in the classroom. I mean, you do to an extent, but the main elements of safety are not in the kind of bricks and mortar of the building. The safety is in you as the person. And I think teachers need to just hold on to that they are competent at helping other people feel safe and secure in their environment and in their classroom. And I think that is through eye contact. That's through exactly what you've just said, Zanele, when teachers check in with children. So kind of in some ways going back to that core competency of what it means to be a teacher, which is to create an environment that feels trusting and safe for children. And that's not through necessarily what you do, but it's through who you are and how you come across to them. That I think would be really something for teachers to hold on to as they're trying to regulate their own anxiety next week. But I think very practical things for parents would be things like do a drive-by past your kids' school. They haven't necessarily been past their school for a very long time. Put them in the car this weekend and maybe 2 or 3 times just on the routes going to the shop, drive by school so that it almost becomes back into their consciousness. Take the route that you would normally go to school. Let them get back into that routine of it. Make sure that they're getting up early again over the course of this weekend so that it doesn't feel like such a shock to their system when they have to get up on Monday. Get them to practice wearing masks, especially for the younger kids, because they are uncomfortable. And I mean, thought of being in a mask for a very long time isn't appealing to many, but just help them to kind of practice with it. Maybe even pack a second mask in their bag and tell them that if their first mask is feeling really uncomfy after an hour or two, to swap it out. Sometimes just that change will help to make them feel a little bit better. Chat to them about what they can probably expect. So give them kind of some expectations around what might change. And this could be in the car once you've just driven past the school thinking, I wonder what will be different when you go back to school now, and let them kind of fill in those answers. Well, we'll have to wear masks. The classes might be split. You might not be in the same class as your friend. There's not going to be sports. The rules around the social kind of playground might be slightly different. So you don't want to do it in a way that's kind of going, these are all the things that are going to change. This is terrifying. But just in a way that they start thinking about that so that they're visualizing something slightly different to what they have been accustomed to. I think you can also do some breathing exercises with them if you have a very panicky child, or if you are feeling quite panicky yourself. Just slowing down your breathing, kind of breathing in the calm, hold 2, 3, breathe out the worries, or breathe out the stress if you're an adult. And doing that 2 to 3, sometimes up to 5 times, it just calms your central nervous system and it just brings your whole body down to a different level of functioning. So that's a good tip, especially for kids if they're feeling claustrophobic in their masks. I think I would also encourage parents to think a little bit about the fact that you're not alone in this, and teachers as well. We are all in this together, like Zanele, you highlighted earlier. And, it's going to take a bit of collective action and collective movement to be able to make this successful. But just remember that you're not alone in this, and that there are lots of spaces for you to talk about it with other people, but just make sure you're talking to the right people who are going to help alleviate your anxiety rather than build it. Zanele, I'm aware that we are sitting now at 2:59, and we had every intention to take some questions, but we haven't allowed our participants to interact like that, unfortunately. I wonder
Yeah.
if you want to give any closing thoughts, in particular
Sure.
for teachers or wider than that, before we wrap it up.
Not a problem. And I'll actually speak to one of the comments that's in the chat box from Jen. She says, as a teacher, I feel anxious because the learners will look to her. And this is something it's understandable. The learners look to you to be calm, collected, and know what's happening. But the key here is honesty. And the more you can be honest, the more you can actually hold that confidence of the children. Let them know what you know. So they must know what you know at this stage. So as boys and girls, as far as I know, this and this and this is what's going on. Unfortunately, at this time, I'm not aware of this and this and this. But as soon as I know, I will let you know. That way they know that whatever happens, if there's new information, sir or ma'am will always know what's going on. And not only will they know, they will tell us. And that, I promise, is one of the best ways to do it. And then there's no pressure on you as well to always know everything and to be the all-knowing seer. But it's that when you do know what you know, make sure that they know it too, so that their minds can be at ease and they can feel that they are at the same level as Miss So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, and what they know at the time. Because one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to create this hierarchy of, I know what's going on here. You just sit back and I'll let you know when it's time. They want to also get involved because it's their lives at stake here as well. And I think that that's how I'm going to end off, just to thank everyone for coming through and just to say that keep calm, you've got this. And that's why we called that's why the title of this webinar was exactly that, because you do have what it takes and you can do this and you will make it through this, whatever happens.
Thank you so much, Zanele. You know, I see that people are saying, can we not continue? There's more that they want to hear from us. And maybe it would be great to have your suggestions. You know, we can run these half-an-hour check-ins as the school year starts to unfold again, because the anxieties are going to shift. And our job here is to be reliable and consistent. And I think that's what we are hoping that parents and teachers will be able to do as well. Just be reliable, just be consistent. And that's a huge credit to your kids. You're going to make them feel safe just with your eye contact. Teachers as well, you know, your kids are excited to see you. You have often been the reason that they like going to school, sometimes the only reason that they like going to school. So I know that from a lot of the kids I've been working with, they're really pumped to see their teachers again. And I think that just speaks to the level of trust that teachers are able to build in such a short amount of time with kids, which is so remarkable. So parents, trust your teachers. Teachers, trust yourself. I think that's all of it from Zanele and I. There is a bit.ly link in the chat if you would like to access a Smart Parents document, which kind of outlines how to help children manage through anxiety. If you would like to get in contact with us, please contact Tomorrow Today. We'd be happy to take any emails or suggestions. If this is more of what you want to see, Zanele and I can be back again anytime that you need us. But otherwise, have a wonderful weekend. Keep calm, parents. You've got this. Cheers.
Bye.